So good morning and welcome. My name is Reverend Ron Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to our Sunday celebration for the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast. If there's anybody watching this at any time that's never been to a Center for Spiritual Living, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are, and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here. And every Sunday we open with a prayer and a reading, and then a reading. And this morning, our practitioner, Ginny Panic, is going to open us with a prayer, and then Barb Loftus will honor us with a spiritual reading.
So let us take a moment to move into this sacred space of now. This where all possibility exists. As we breathe in and we breathe out, we say thank you. Thank you for the gifts of the Spirit. So I know that there is only one life, and I know there is only one Spirit, one truth, one all that is, and it is everywhere, in everyone, as everyone. What I know for myself, I know for each one. And I know the glory of God is revealed within each one. And we are never stuck. We are never alone. We are never immersed enough into a story to get out. We have an avenue. We have an outlet. We only turn our attention to this divine givingness. And it says yes. It says yes every time. And it speaks to us as we sit in the silence and we listen to the words of wisdom, and we are able to discern and to make wise choices and to move into a greater expression of life. And so I'm grateful this morning for the Center for Spiritual Awareness Space Coast. I am grateful for Dr. Ron Fox and his message this morning. And I am grateful for the illumination that each one feels from this message as we are lifted up and are moved forward and see more clearly and live more fully. And so I just release this into the great I am that always says yes. And so it is.
Thank you, Ginny.
So today I'm reading out of a book by Lars Muehl called The Law of Light, and it's page 101. Self-development. At the same time, we should take the consequences of the new awareness and begin to practice the precepts in the law of light. By understanding that a human being is fundamentally pure spirit and that the physical body is only on loan, we also understand how important it is that our behavior reflects this relationship. Self-development means that we extricate ourselves from all the mess we have hitherto bound ourselves up in, that we dismantle everything that is no longer useful. Old habits must give way to a new practice made up, for example, of meditation, song, dance, prayer, and positive affirmations. According to the Aramaic psychology, thoughts and the mind make up a river into which one is not obliged to jump. Meditation is, first and foremost, daring to repose in the open mind. Thoughts cannot be eradicated, but we can resist giving them conscious energy. All this lays the foundation for a new behavior whose actions spring out of stillness. A new awareness and an intensified intimacy open the way for totally new relationships and for new possibilities in old relationships.
Thank you, Barb. So good morning again. The title for my message today is Boldly Living a New Story. And you know, we all tell stories about our life, particularly when our life is changing, you know, when we may be moving, starting a new job, starting a new relationship, or emerging from a pandemic. You know, think about that. In a relatively short time, we're going to be emerging from this, and what are the stories we're going to be telling about the time in the pandemic, or how are we going to be when it's all over? What changes are we going to make? You know, sometimes when we tell our stories, we're the hero, and sometimes we're the victim. And to me, boldly living a new story means giving up on the old that doesn't serve us as well anymore, and starting on the new. And when we come up with a new story for our life, who are we? And how do we do that? You know, it said that when the Buddha was on his deathbed, um, his disciples were really in fear, and they asked him, "What are we going to do when you're gone?" And his comment back was, "Be a lamp unto yourself." And years later, Jesus said something really similar when he said, "The kingdom of God is within." And so, what does that mean? Well, one author says that speaks to our sacred individuality. It means to not follow anything blindly, but rather to seek out our own inner truth. And Joseph Sharp, who's a chaplain, a minister, and worked in Texas at a hospital, said that the greatest lesson that we have to learn is permission, giving ourselves permission to be fully human, giving ourselves permission to acknowledge our fears and our triumphs that we encounter all the time along our path. And the Buddhist teacher Lama Surya Das talks about attachment. And he says, you know, we all get attached to things, whether it's where we live, our beliefs, our ideas. And he said to create change in our life, to create meaningful change, we have to be willing to give up our attachments. And so, you know, think about this. Maybe today, sometimes stop and think to yourself, what are my attachments? What do I think I can't live without? Is it status? Is it security? Is it a good job? Is it good food? Sex? What is it? You know, I thought about reading something that I had written years ago today, and I decided not to do it because I read it before. But the lesson for me, I wrote something in a class about my attachments, and what my learning was, all of the things in my younger life that I thought I was attached to, in fact, that I couldn't live without, they were all gone, and I'm doing better than ever. So, you know, think about that. What is it that you think you can't live without, but you'll be able to if you set your mind to it? What ask yourself, what ideas and beliefs am I most attached to? And what would happen if you let, I thought about this a lot this week. Lama Surya does. So what happened if you let go of a particular worldview? If your attachment to a political party, if you let that go, who would you be without all of these external attachments? Ernest Holmes, who founded the Centers for Spiritual Living, wrote, "Freedom of will means the ability to do, say, and think as one wishes, to express life as one personally desires. To be able to think and dream of freedom would not be liberty." So let me give you an example of an attachment. So I was reading a book this week by a minister named Robert V. Taylor, who was born and lived a lot of his life in South Africa. And he talks about a vignette in the book where a woman who came to see him, who was one of his congregants, and she came basically to ask his forgiveness. She said, you know, I stopped coming to church, and I stopped coming because I couldn't deal with the fact that you were openly gay. I couldn't deal with that. And she said, not only that, I have a daughter who's openly gay. And she didn't know how to fit those things into the truth of her life. And at some point, she realized it wasn't about her daughter and it wasn't about Taylor. It was about her. It was about her and the image in her life that was set in stone. And she made the decision to let go of that, to let go of images that chained her, because she wants to live a bigger life. She wants to live the truth, excuse me, the truth of her life. And after telling that story in the book, Taylor goes on to talk about enclosures. And so what is an enclosure? He says an enclosure is when we allow ourselves to be confined by unacceptable boundaries that are put on us by others. And it could be family, it could be our religion, it could be our culture, it could be our friends, it could be our politics. But when we accept an enclosure, then that limits us. It limits the life that we live. When we accept an enclosure, in effect, we're squelching the life that we live. And we're living with a lack of compassion for ourselves. But there is good news in this. And the good news is, if we make the choice to accept an enclosure, we can also make the choice to move on beyond the enclosure, as that woman who came to see him did. So how do we do it? And Taylor says there are 3 ways that we can do it. And the first one is to listen to our own voice and to be discerning when we hear the voice of other people. The second way is to become present to ourselves and to see the glimpses of spirit that are within us. And the third one is to be compassionate with ourselves and with others. So I know that there are a number of us that are on this call that enjoy reading and learning from Eckhart Tolle. And so I was reading some of Eckhart this week, and he said, all of us want peace. And yet there is something within all of us that wants drama. So we want peace and we want drama. And he said, sometimes can you feel yourself? Can you feel your own voice getting shrill and getting louder? Can you feel your mind raising itself to defend your position, to justify your position, to attack, to blame? He said, can you feel that there's something within you that would rather be right than be peaceful? Think about that. Is there something within you that would rather be right than be peaceful? And he said, we can move beyond that ego. We can move beyond it to find a place of peace. We don't have to stay stuck. And Ernest Holmes, let me say something again that Ernest Holmes said. He said, that which thought has done, thought can undo. Lifelong habits of wrong thinking can be consciously and deliberately neutralized, and an entirely new order of mental and emotional reaction can be established in mind. And then he went on to say, to merely abstain from wrong thinking isn't enough. There must be active right thinking. So just to stop isn't enough. We need to replace those thoughts that no longer serve with thoughts that do serve and that are alive and well within us. So I've spoken about Wendy Craig Purcell in the book that she wrote on questions before. And one of the questions she raises in the book is, who am I trying to please? Who am I trying to please? And to make the point, she writes about a fable, and the fable is about an elderly man moving or going from town to town. It doesn't say what he's doing, probably doing business. An elderly man moving from town to town or village to village with a mule and his grandson. And they're walking along and they get to the first town, and the people in the first town say to him, "What kind of a fool are you? What are you doing? At your age, you're walking? Get up and get on that mule." And he said, "You're right." So he gets up and he starts riding on the mule. They get to the next town and the people look at him and they say, "What kind of cruel person are you? You're walking and you're riding the mule and you're letting your young grandson walk? How can you do that?" And he says, "You're right." Gets off the mule and puts his grandson on, and on they go to the next town, where when the people see the young boy on the mule and the grandfather walking, they say to the young boy, "What's wrong with you? How selfish can you be? You're letting your old grandfather walk while you're comfortable." And they agree. And so the grandfather gets on, and now they're both riding the mule, and they go on to the next town, where when the people see the both of them on the mule, they say, "How cruel could you be putting all that weight on the mule?" And they get off, and the story ends by saying, when last seen, they were continuing to the next village with the grandfather carrying the mule. Silly story, but the point of the story is, who am I trying to please? You please yourself most, and you please others most when you are your authentic self. So let go of the things that only please others and try to be the best you that you can be. So I'm hoping that some of you know who Maria Bello is. Maria Bello is an actress, and recently she was on the show NCIS. She just left it, if any of you watch that show. Well, Maria was brought, I read this story about her years ago. Maria was brought up in Philadelphia in a Catholic family, and her family impressed on her how important it is to give back and live a life of service where you're helping others. And Maria went on to college, and at some point in her college career, she got a crush on a guy, and she found out that this guy was taking an acting class. And so Maria decided to take the acting class, not for the class, but for the proximity of being with this guy she had a crush on. Well, she fell in love with acting. And she, at some point, decided to make the decision that she was going to become an actress. And when she thought about it, she thought to herself, that's not really what I was taught to do. I'm not really serving in the way I think my family would be proud of me and would expect from me. And so she was conflicted, and she went to see her priest. And her priest said to her, "Maria, you're living the best life that you can live when you live from what's in your heart and what brings you joy. So move forward in your life doing that." And because that priest gave her that advice, we all inherited a beautiful and wonderful actress. Greg Lavoy wrote a book titled Callings. And I want to share with you, I think I might have shared this story before, but I want to just share with you a quick vignette he has in the book. The vignette is that a fellow goes to see a psychiatrist because he believes he's dead. And they have session after session, and there's nothing the psychiatrist could do to convince this fellow that he's not dead. And so finally, in desperation, at one session, the psychiatrist says to him, well, you know, everybody knows dead men don't bleed, right? And the fella says, yes, I know that. And so the psychiatrist takes a pin and he sticks him with the pin, and the guy bleeds. And the psychiatrist looks at him, and the fella says, well, what do you know? Dead men do bleed. The point of the story is that change is really difficult, and there's no security in change. And when we try to shelter ourselves from change, we isolate ourselves from living. And Lavoy writes, the risks that we don't take today are the regrets we have tomorrow. The risks that we don't take today are the regrets that we have tomorrow. Some of you might have heard this quote: there are no guarantees. From the point of fear, none are strong enough. And from the point of love, none are necessary. So I want to close today. I want to read something from my book, Experiencing the Beacon Within. And there's a quote in there that from the Gospel of Thomas that says, if you bring forth what's within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, it will kill you. And so I titled this Being Real. And I wrote, being real means being true to ourselves, listening to our inner voice and following it. It means living our ideals rather than just talking about them. And I quote Holmes in there, who said, we must learn to live by inspiration. That means we should let the spiritual depths of our being flow through our conversation and into our acts. And notice he speaks about our acts. Talking isn't enough. And none of that, I know it. I live it every day. It's not easy. And it's particularly not easy if our friends and family and other people that we know and are with, if they're not in agreement with us. But being true to ourselves is essential to living a happy and a centered life. And then I go on to talk about a Hasidic tale about a rabbi named Zusha. And he was getting on in years, and one of his students asked him what he feared most about dying. And his response was, I'm afraid what they're going to ask me when I get to heaven. And the student says, what do you mean? And he said, what do you think they're going to ask you? And Zusha says, they're going to ask me, Zusha, why were you not Zusha? In other words, why were you not true to who you are? Why did you live someone else's truth and not your own? If we walk our talk, it's a question we'll never have to answer. God bless you. Thank you for being here this morning, and have a blessed week.